It's time for another Boortz3a.
I do have some specific figures for you. I now have a chart that was developed by the fair tax people, and it says net average remaining lifetime tax rates for a couple with 2 children. Let me try to explain this. It takes, for instance, a couple with 2 children that is earning $20,000 a year. Under our current income and payroll taxes, that couple would pay 7.1% of all of the money that they earn for the rest of their lives to the federal government in income taxes and payroll taxes. Now that's a couple earning $20,000. 7.1% of that would go to the federal government for income and payroll taxes. If the fair tax was passed, 2.4% of their future income would go to the federal government. Now, the email from the White House says these poor people are going to pay so much more. But this chart where you look at the fair tax as it is written, you do not rewrite it to satisfy your own whims. The poorest of the poor, the couple with 2 children only earning $20,000 a year, and what in the hell are they doing with 2 children if they can only earn $20,000 a year? The burden on that family would go down considerably from 7.1% of everything they earn to 2.4%. I'm not going to read you the whole chart, but what if we get into the $70,000 range? Under the income and payroll taxes we now have, that couple with 2 children would pay 19.8% of all of the money they earn over the rest of their lives to the federal government in income and payroll taxes. Under the fair tax, that 19.8% would go down to 12.5%. And let's take a couple that earns $200,000 a year. Couple, 2 children. The rest of their lives, under the income and payroll tax, 29.5% of that money would go to the federal government. Under the fair tax, 17.8% would go to the federal government. This is just basic political dishonesty, folks. We're going to look at the fair tax, and we're going to tell you what our studies say the fair tax would do to the American economy and the American people. And then they go behind their closed doors and they rewrite the fair tax into a version that suits them. And then they come out and say, okay, we've looked at the fair tax, and here's what it would do. It is a complete dishonest fraud. The White House knows this. The White House and most politicians also know that under the fair tax, or if the fair tax were to be passed, it would be the most massive, and I've said this before, the most massive transfer of power from the federal government to the people of this country since our Constitution was ratified. This is not something that politicians want. They do not want to pass legislation that gives away massive hunks of their power.